I did ask Matt Rayner to give this presentation. Matt is up in the Bay of Islands doing a bio-blitz. So I then asked Alan Tennyson, who's at Te Papa, but he's just come back from the sub-Antarctic, said he's too damn busy. He'd love to be here. So it's me again, sorry. This is very quick. New Zealand Storm Petrel. Bit of background. New Zealand Storm Petrel, once thought to be extinct. Known from only 3 specimens, those 3 at the top, 2 in the Paris Museum of Natural History, 1 in the British Museum of Natural History at Tring. They were collected in the 19th century, all at sea. The bird was described but never seen until 2003, when it was rediscovered off the Coromandel coast by some bird watchers and photographed. That obviously prompted a lot of interest in the bird, first to identify it properly. In 2005, there was the first live capture. It was a bird that flew onto a crayfish boat anchored off the back of Hauturu, Little Barrier. Fortunately, the guy, Geordie Merman, who was on the boat, happened to be an ex-wildlife. He was a crayfishman, but he happened to be an ex-wildlife service person who worked down the Chathams, on Chatham Island taiko and short plovers and so on. So he actually sort of picked this bird up and sort of knew it was something special, and actually called us up, and a team went out and took photographs and measured the bird and let it go. In 2012, between 2006 and 2012, there were a few captures of birds, but in 2012 we managed to capture a good number of birds through the season. Because one of the mysteries about the bird was, when were they breeding? If you're going to try and find out where they were breeding, you had to sort of pin the timing of breeding. And a lot of the birds within the Hauraki Gulf, they breed either late or through the winter into spring or spring, summer. White-faced storm petrels, the other storm petrel that breeds in the Hauraki Gulf, they come back from migration in September, and they depart around about February. So we thought, well, maybe these birds are a similar time to that, or maybe slightly later, but certainly a strong overlap. The captures in 2012, one, confirmed the feasibility of catching numbers of birds. We refined our methods and developed our net guns accordingly. But we confirmed a very late breeding. The birds were likely to be laying from late February and potentially going right through to June and July, in terms of, which was very late for all. It was way out of kilter with all the other species breeding in the Hauraki Gulf. 2013. Caught up to, I think it was 24 birds, and little VHF tags, radio tags were put on them, and a number of birds were tracked back towards Hauturu, and finally one bird was discovered on a nest through a very, just an amazing discovery down in a ravine. If you ever work with the VHF and try to track birds around, it requires a lot of people in a lot of areas sort of scanning and so on. And 2 people out, Graham Lowe and Richard Voller from who was the ranger on the island, picked up a signal of a stationary bird. They went to a ridge, they knew it was in this gorge down below. It meant dropping, this was at 2 o'clock in the morning, dropped down into the gorge. But the problem is VHF signals, they can bounce. They can bounce backwards and forwards. And so they were going backwards and forwards across this ravine trying to sort of find this bird, but finally found it under some kiki nesting there. So that was the first one found. We found another 4 burrows in the same valley. 2015, we're attempting to set up an artificial colony using sound attraction, so using acoustic attraction. This is playing the birds' calls, so we managed to, prior to that, get recorders out on the island and get some recordings of the birds. And so we're broadcasting those calls, and trying to get the birds to breed. And we're also, from 2015 on, sort of doing more searches to determine the extent of the birds breeding on the island. Between 2015 2018, this is basically results from a paper that's just about to be submitted. So a market recapture program leads to population estimate for the bird. I mean, we're always asked, well, how many are they? And the bird come back from extinction. The idea was that maybe the birds were right down to maybe 250 pairs or 300 pairs. Well, since through that period, 2015, 2018, we actually caught 415 birds, storm petrels, and these were marked with colour bands and metal bands. 2 market recapture models were developed using recaptures on land, but also looking at sightings at sea. So, spending a set period out at sea and then counting the number of birds seen and then looking at the proportion of birds that were banded against those which didn't have bands. So the model estimates have, using the land-based ones, is just under 1,000 individuals, and at sea 1,630 individuals. And you can look at the range of population range within that. There is a discrepancy between the models, and that the birds that are attracted to the lights we were using, so the method we used was based on what was used for Chatham Island taiko, and developed for Chatham Island taiko, which is to blast a big beam, a spotlight straight up into the sky, and then use handheld powerful torches to actually bring the birds down. So you can actually sort of, you see the birds come into the big beam, and then you can actually get onto them and bring them down, and if you do it right, they land at your feet. So we were able to capture them that way. The thing is about that attraction method is that most of the birds we were catching that way were young birds, not breeding birds, more susceptible to being attracted to light. We were also looking at brood patches and so on. This is, whether the birds were incubating eggs and so on. So the bias was very much towards young birds being caught. So we consider the at-sea estimate the most representative of total population, assuming that there are no other populations on other islands. But the encouraging news is that, the trajectory for this species is that it's on the up. And, we're seeing that in the market capture as well. Why is that the case? Well, Hauturu had cats taken off the island first and then rats taken off the island in 2004, 2006. So it's a predator-free island. This is the species that's been released from that predation pressure, and they can start breeding after maybe 2-3 years. So, the trajectory can be relatively quick. This attempt to set up an artificial colony, so we're using playback systems. So we've got recordings of birds up in around near where the natural burrows are, up the gorge, and we're playing those through a very powerful playback system. 50 nest boxes have been installed in 2 separate areas, about 20 metres apart. And we're finding that New Zealand storm petrels, you can see 2 in this picture here, are arriving at the site from September, which, given the species, we now know that they're not laying eggs until late February, early March. They're spending a lot of time, in and around the island. We've had eggs laid in the nest boxes over 2 seasons, but we haven't had chicks hatched. So we feel that, okay, what we're getting are probably immature birds, and maybe over time that these birds will, by repeat visits, start breeding. So we're hopeful, but we're certainly getting birds turning up to the site, and in good numbers as well. Next stages, Do New Zealand storm petrels breed on the other island? Well, we're using two different techniques. One is the deployment of what we call camera playback traps, which is like having a portable version of the acoustic attraction, broadcasting the bird's calls, but you set it up with a small speaker, and then you put a camera nearby, and that plays through the night, and lo and behold, you get birds turning up. So these are being located around, last season we had them in an area that we knew there were burrows, natural burrows, and that's where that photograph's taken. But we also put one right up on top of the island at another site, and we had birds, or a bird, turning up to that one as well. The other thing we're looking at is to do further captures at sea, where we know New Zealand storm petrels are being seen in good numbers. So this is up far north, off Cape, North Cape, maybe outside the Poor Knights, but certainly away from the region where we see them within the Hauraki Gulf. And that will add to a genetic study which might be able to differentiate between different populations. At the moment we don't have a net gun, so we're now on the hunt to develop a new one. We've got the methods to do it, but we just need to sort that out and then get underway. So, thank you. That's New Zealand storm petrel. And I'd certainly like to thank the Chisholm Whitney Charitable Trust for their support for this work over the last 3 seasons. Thank you.